Copenhagen.
Až tam dozadu, jo?
Ano. It doesn't matter where we sit.
Yeah.
Second one. Okay.
So I'm the first here, yeah?
Good evening, everybody. Is my microphone working? Yes, hi. Steve, do you want to just tell me what...
Yeah.
Hi, good to see you, Robert.
Good to see you.
Good to see you,
Hi,
yeah.
good to see you. Hi for everybody. My name is Róbert Vass. I'm the founder of Globsec Forum. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all here at the Globsec City Talks Bratislava. This is the 11th year for us, for Globsec. We are opening a new chapter for the next decade, and we have big ambitions with Globsec for years to come. Globsec has proved to be an excellent platform for debates on international security and foreign policy. And we wanted to bring those debates from the hotel Grand Hotel River Park also outside of the main conference room, because we care about the public voice. And we wanted to bring them to the Bratislava city. This is also, for us, a very innovative format. We are doing this for the third time here in Bratislava. And this is a testing ground for us. We go beyond the traditional conference formats that we have at the big Globsec in the hotel. And we are trying to bring innovations. So what we test here and will work, we'll bring that back to the Grand Hotel River Park. And also, we will introduce this time to Oxford-style debates. So we wanted to be a little bit more interactive. And we are very glad that we have the cooperation with the BBC World News. So one of the debates will be then streamed worldwide in all the countries where BBC has the reach, the outreach. So from Bratislava, we will be seeing some of the debates on the BBC World Debate. It is a perfect promotion for Bratislava and Slovakia, because when we were thinking, what is our image, Minister of Foreign Affairs Lajčák said that Globsec is already a strong part of the Slovakia's image abroad. So I think when we have 180 journalists coming to Bratislava and reporting about that from 30 countries, it is definitely a very good promotion for Bratislava and Slovakia. So let me thank to the Mayor of Bratislava, Ivo Nesrovnal, for hosting the Bratislava City Talks, and give him the floor to welcome you on the behalf of Bratislava. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Dear guests, friends, I'd like to welcome you to Bratislava, to the capital of Slovak Republic. I'm very proud as a mayor that Bratislava is hosting such an important and increasingly interesting event, and I wish I'd like to talk to the organizers. Robert, again, you have done a great deal, a great job for Bratislava and for Slovakia, not only for this international community. I'm also glad that even these side events like this attract enough young people who are eager to listen to the panelists and talk about international security and issues which will be dealt with later. You know, Bratislava is a fairly young capital. It's been only 24 years that we are the capital of Slovak Republic, which is compared with 100 or 1,000 years of Vienna, Rome. Really short time to be established, and yet we still are looking for the best way how to govern the city, how to allocate resources, how to divide the competencies, because only those who have firm and lean structures will survive the uncertain times, and will be able to tackle the issues which emerge, which are expected, like the typical urban agenda is climate change or mobility, infrastructure problems, air pollution, or digital agenda, but also those problems who come less expected, like safety, security, or migrants, or this rise of extremist political movements. So in order to tackle those, we need, I would say, three things which we shall keep to or stick to. And the first is the faith, because we live in strange times where there are many who are trying to shake our faith in liberal democracies, who are trying to disrupt our faith in institutions, in our way of life, saying that those liberal democracies are not able to solve the daily problems we are facing. And this disruption starts with questioning the ability of European Union or the competence of European Union, and ends with killing innocent people on the airports. And therefore, I think we shall not surrender to those, and we shall keep our faith in liberal democracy, in human rights, individual human rights, in free market economy, and our way of life. The second, which I would like to mention, is because faith is not enough, it's an action. If you believe that our states, our cities should be able to tackle the problems, we should support them. We should take the action and support the cities in investing them enough competencies, human and financial resources, in order to tackle expected urban agenda, but also those events who are less expected. But only structures with firm and solid, lean governance will be solid enough to survive these uncertain times. We should use the principle of subsidiarity. That means the problems shall be solved at the level they're born, so to speak. And the third, which I have to and like to mention, is the principle of cooperation. And that goes very special for Bratislava, because, as you know, we are a border city, and dozens of thousands of our people live in Hungary, in Austria, and commute daily to Bratislava. That brings along thousands of daily small problems which you can solve only when you talk and cooperate, and talk and meet and talk and cooperate. So I would say we should keep the faith, we should take the action and cooperate, because we should not let others solve things which we can do ourselves by daily cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, I would say we live in uncertain times. It's a not easy time, but I believe that there were no times like easy times ever in human race. And on the other hand, in fact, I believe we live in best time ever, and that goes for Slovakia and Bratislava especially. So in order to keep it that way, as I said, we need faith, take action, and cooperate. And thank you again, Robert, for organizing this beautiful event, and I wish you a good debate and have a wonderful time in Bratislava. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, on June the 23rd, the people of the United Kingdom will hold a referendum in which Brits can vote for whether or not they believe the UK should remain a member of the European Union, or cast itself adrift politically and economically in order to restore full sovereign decisions over all British policies. Well, British Prime Minister David Cameron promised the referendum 3 years ago as a tactical move to dilute the fast-growing success of UKIP, the United Kingdom Independence Party. His main aim, to guarantee enough votes to ensure the Conservative Party's re-election in last year's national election. The Conservatives did win a full majority. Now there are many signs that standing by his referendum promise is exacting an enormous political price. The referendum has bitterly split the Conservative Party, many are saying irreparably. Each time the leading Remain campaigners like Mr Cameron, the Chancellor George Osborne, hit choppy waters like controversial limiting of disability benefits in the recent budget, a government resignation, a minister's private affair with a sex worker, and now what the Panama Papers have revealed about ministers' private finances, all leads to a reduction in support for staying in the European Union. What seemed improbable and unthinkable now seems not just possible, but something maybe closer to inevitable. A majority of the British may want the UK to leave Britain, not because of views on the European Union, but because of anger with a host of other issues, including disillusionment with the Tory leadership and the decision to hold the referendum. Latest opinion polls put the whole vote on a knife edge, 50% to 50% among those who are going to vote, with a significant margin of error, though. Well, we have an excellent panel for you. Arguing for the motion, Robin Shepherd ran the Europe programme at Chatham House, the think tank in London. He's the owner and publisher of Britain's fastest growing media platform, The Commentator. And Alika Hammond, who is a member of the Parliament of Denmark, which has become increasingly cool on the country's commitment to the European Union. She comes from Greenland, which has left the European Union. Arguing against the motion, Philip Bond is political and economic commentator from Britain and is now director of Res Publica, which consults on strategic advice. And Michael Santowski, welcome, who risked creating the Civic Forum movement, which toppled communism in 1989, became spokesman for President Václav Havel, and ended his ambassadorial career in the United Kingdom. Ladies and gentlemen, your panel. Shortly, you'll hear from all four panellists, 2 for the motion, 2 and against. I'll then throw the debate open to the floor to hear as many views as possible from both sides. The audience was asked to vote on this motion before the debate, and I'll tell you shortly which way you're thinking now. Then you can judge how much the deliberations up here and among you have swayed the view. Now, the opening statements from the panellists on the motion, the UK will be better off outside the European Union. Let's go first to Robin. Robin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Do I need this?
Take it with you over there.
See if it works. Thank you very much, or I should say, dobrý večer. Ďakujem za vašu prítomnosť. Ja bývam tu na Slovensku niekoľko rokov, ale aj tak ako nebývam tu celý čas, aj v Amerike, aj ve Veľkej Británie. Ale ďakujem za vašu prítomnosť. That's the conclusion in Slovak.
You get 20 more seconds.
20 more seconds for that, thank you very much. Only more Slovak later on in the pub. I'm assuming that there'll be enough people to invite where I can actually pay those people who will agree with the Brexit position. Who knows, I could be proved wrong. One quick preliminary point, I'm just recovering from a chest infection, so if I ever sound a little bit breathless, it's not because I'm rushing for Brexit. Britain may do that, I'll have to do it more slowly, but at least you have been warned in advance. We have a very short time here, and Nick will impose discipline, which frightens me. Therefore, I'm going to come straight to the point and to discuss 4 substantive issues in the case to stay or go, which ultimately, I believe, mean that Britain should leave the European Union. The first is democracy. The second is the economy. The second is strategic reach. Democracy, economy, strategic reach, and the fourth is strategic stability. You see, the Brexiters have problems with maths. I think we're better at political science, we'll see. Democracy, this has always been the biggest and most powerful reason to leave the European Union as currently constituted. Because for those, and this is central, who make of democracy their core political commitment and fundamentally understand what democracy means, the EU has become a net negative in democratic terms. The EU's ambitions, its scope, are now inversely proportional to its ability to be democratic. The reasons for that, if you've been through these arguments before, should be quite familiar. There is no demos, there is no shared political culture. Europeans surely share many things in common, but so do Europeans with Americans, and Europeans with Canadians, and Europeans with Australians. But in the absence of that demos, of that central core that allows for democratic accountability, moves from the national sphere where a demos does exist to the supranational sphere where it doesn't, will amount to a net negative in democratic terms. And as powers have been removed from national democracies, this, in my opinion, has done terrible harm to Europe's democratic culture. as we see, and I'll explain a little further if I have time, the rise of far-right and far-left parties, which have taken advantage of that space that's been created. If you want to protest against the big policies that are governing your lives, the centre-right and centre-left, which is in danger of imploding in Europe, as in other parts of the world, it's not just a problem of the European Union. It creates that space to move your protests to the far right and to the far left. So to me, as a Democrat first and foremost, this is the central reason, the central positive reason, not just for Britain. It's good for Britain to restore its democracy. It's also good for Europe to think again about a path it's taken which has taken it away from democratic values. And I haven't even mentioned, and I'll only very briefly, things like the referendums which were ignored in France and the Netherlands over the European Constitution, and the terrible spectacle of repeat referendums in Ireland. And I challenge anyone to say that this is not a problem. The second issue, the economy. To me, this is net zero when it comes to the question of whether we leave or whether we stay. There are hysterical claims on both sides. You get the people who are arguing against Brexit saying we will lose millions of jobs, we'll be isolated, we'll be pushed out into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, we'll lose our prosperity. You get equally absurd claims on the other side. One of the things that's often raised is this question of Britain becoming a big leader in the Commonwealth again. We become part of this globalized world in a way that we haven't done for quite a long time. These are just red herrings. I think you'll be extremely surprised if Brexit happens, how little difference it's going to make. And the reason for that is because countries trade on the basis of mutual self-interest. And those aspects of self-interest which exist today will also exist the day after Brexit. Moving to the third aspect, strategic reach. It's argued by the Remain campaign that Britain will lose power. It's argued by Brexiters that Britain will again utilise the Commonwealth composed of over 50 countries, reasserting a long-lost strength in the world. Both of these arguments, I think, are false. Again, I think you'll be very surprised to see how little changes. And the reason for that is that the big issues in international security are already determined at the national level, and nothing much will change. The idea that Britain is going to lead the European Union, I think, is fantasy, and all you have to do is look back over the last few years to see when it comes to these big issues, it's all about mix and match and coalitions of the willing. We really do have very little time. My fourth point is about strategic stability. And to me, this is an argument which I think is very finely balanced, and it's the one that has moved for me in a direction which takes me away from staying in the European Union. If you'd asked me this time last year, I think my view would have been, well, let's just stay in because the risks of collapsing this European edifice are too great. But my opinion is that there's no sign whatever that the insider classes in the European Union, and that includes the national governments as well to a great extent, have the mental capacity to deal with the problems that they've created. What we need is to shake this situation up, not to do it in an irresponsible way. I don't want Britain to pull out of Europe and have nothing to do with Europe, and Britain won't pull out and have nothing to do with Europe. Brexit is a net positive for strategic stability because the way that the European Union has developed is causing major problems for the democratic political culture of Europe. And in order to be disciplined, I will stop there and continue as the debate goes on later this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much, Robert. So there you've had the first voice for the motion that Britain should leave the European Union. The first voice against the motion, backing Britain staying in the European Union, Philip Bond, political and economic commentator, now director of Res Publica. Philip, the floor is yours.
Okay.
It's blonde, not Bond, but there are obvious similarities, of course. Okay, very quickly. What I want to talk about is what Europe will be like if Britain leaves and what Britain will be like if Britain decides to exit. Now, I believe in Europe, not just for the sake of the past, for the sake of coming together to finally triumph over European nationalism that has murdered countless millions for many centuries. And I think the civic achievement of Europe is real and should not be neglected or downgraded. And what Europe is, I mean, when Robin speaks, it sounds like as if Europe was smuggled in against our wishes. It's a union of democracies that extends democracies to those areas that previously didn't enjoy it. It's a belief that we share something in common beyond simply race or geography, that we share indeed a Western civic culture that believes it can transcend all that divides us and all that would separate us. In that sense, I think it is a deeply honourable institution with a noble goal. And I would argue largely it's fulfilled that, and it can do yet more. So the potential for Europe to be more democratic isn't increased by destroying this union we have. It is increased by attempting to renew, reform it, and create a new redoubt in the world for culture and value. Now, the thing that threatens us, the thing that drives anything from these far right and far left-wing parties isn't the so-called democratic deficit. It's the fact that the world is rigged in the favour of those who are already well-placed and those who are already wealthy. We know, for instance, from the Panama Papers that essentially the world, whether you're in a democracy or not, is increasingly ruled and governed by an oligarchical class that doesn't pay its fair share. It's globalization that has created a world where working class people have essentially no viable future. And if we are going to create a globalization that actually works for people, it's only through coming together to make sure, for instance, multinationals pay their fair share of tax that we're going to do it. So it's no accident, actually, that the announcement the European Union is going to create measures where actually multinationals, for example, pay fair share of tax on the trade they do in the countries. That's what the European Union can promise, a defence against the wrong sort of globalisation. And it's that sort of globalisation that is leading the type of crises we face. Moreover, the idea that if we leave the EU, stability will ensue is farcical. What we have is Obama's pivot to the east, an American indifference to Europe's borders, and Europe has to step up to the plate to stabilise its near abroad. If we don't stabilise and operate together, literally millions upon millions of people will come across, at great danger, the Mediterranean, flood Europe and promote even more extreme populism. It's only by coming together that we can create a redoubt that can actually help stabilise these countries. So I'm in favour of developing an EU military option that's below NATO, that creates ways in which we can stabilise our near abroad, because only that will achieve security. Finally, if actually you can imagine a Europe without Britain, a Europe without what shortly will be Europe's strongest economy. By 2050, will have its largest population. It will be a Europe diminished. It will be a Europe without Europe's strongest military power, that is prepared to deploy its soldiers, that is prepared to die for both British and European values. And it has done time and time again, when Britain has saved Europe from tyrants and demagogues and even worse fates, and we would do so again. And to lose that on your flank will be a terrible damage. And for Britain, it would be a terrible thing. Because for Britain, and I'm a British patriot, I think the path to British global influence in the 21st century is through a seat with Europe. By 2050, as I've already said, we will be the largest economy, the largest population in Europe. This will be a force multiplier, a magnifier of British influence to extend stable constitutions, rule of law, rights, respect and stability across the world. This is Britain's path to maintaining our global influence, which is soft but is real and can create opportunities for the world. And with Britain in Europe, Europe will be the leading power in the world, because no one else can match what Europe has and what Europe hopes to achieve. Thank you very much. The whole thing's in crisis. How can you lead translation?
Thank you very much, Philip, and I apologise for getting your surname wrong. The Max spell check. No, the Max spell check thought actually you should be named Bond. So that's what came up. I do apologise. Yeah, But thank you very much indeed. Let's move on now with the second voice for the motion, Aleka Hammond, who comes from Greenland, a member of the Parliament of Denmark, a former Prime Minister of Greenland, who's becoming increasingly cool on the country's commitment to the European Union in Denmark. The floor is yours.
Yeah, it's all right. Hi, everybody. It's wonderful to be here with you. I am an Inuk, which is Inuit people, and I come from Greenland. Greenland became member of the European Union back in 1973, as Denmark became member of the European Union, automatically. We stepped out 12 years later. The people of Greenland decided not to be part of the European Union. It was the best decision I ever have experienced. It's the best decision we ever made to take charge of our own country, our own agenda, and thinking globally, using European Union as a partner instead of being part of it. I think it's very important that when we are talking about European Union, that we see it in more different, diverse ways. We are very small people that are only 56,000 people today. And the European Union is very far away from us. Our country is part of the North American continent. We don't look like European, we don't think like European, and our language is not European at all. We saw as the European Union, as we have to be able to think as brothers and sisters and partners all the way. We had difficulty in seeing that when all the decisions about our everyday life, more or less, were decided in Brussels. I think it's very important for people that have a word to say, that you are not letting the decision to be taken for you somewhere else. I think it's very important for a democratic country, for people that are thinking globally, take action themselves. The people of Greenland should decide whether they want to be part of the European Union or not. And in 1985, we stepped out. It was a fight, but we stepped out. We have seen European Union as another dimension. We see potentials with the European Union. We see cooperation with the European Union, but we don't have to be part of it. We have today a very, very good partnership agreement with the European Union regarding fishing quotas for Greenland, fishing in the cleanest waters of the world. And we also have increased our partnership agreement with the European Union within enhancing the education level of Greenlanders. Our partnership agreement with the European Union is a very strong one that has also given an inspiration to the other overseas countries and territories to the European Union. I think it's very important to see, by the time we stepped out of the European Union and the partnership agreement we have with the European Union today, we are better off, both economically, but also with our voice within the European Union. The world looked different in the 1980s. The world looks different today. But today, with the globalization, I think that for every year we have seen how the European Union has been developing, the more happier we are for the decision we made. We are not nationalists. We are not only because we are thinking nationalistic, we are thinking globally. The world is so much more than the European Union. The world is so much more than European Union regulations. Being able to think globally and using the different kinds of bodies around the world as partners is the way ahead. And I think integrity and world economy and global thinking is the way ahead. We have nothing against European Union. They need us and we need them. But we don't have to be part of it. We can have a fantastic cooperation within each other. And we are very proud of the partnership agreement we have with the European Union. Now the European Union is showing a lot of interest to the Arctic regions. The world is being remapped this time with the Arctic and center. The European Union wants to be part of the Arctic Council as observer status. The European Union sees that the Arctic is very important. In this matter, Greenland stands stronger than ever before because the European Union needs to be even better and closer partners with Greenlanders in connection with the fight for the North Pole. And I think talking about whether you should be for or against the European Union, we as politicians, we can have a lot of opinions, but the majority of the Greenlanders have spoken back in 1980s. and we are not changing our opinion. On the contrary, I think that it's very important that the global agenda should be the one that is leading us ahead, both as a people, as economy, as geopolitical issues, and not only European Union. Thank you.
Alika Hammond, thank you very much indeed. I should tell you that I think I'm told our microphones are now working correctly, so we're back to where we should have been right at the start. Finally, the second voice against the motion, Michael Zentowski, who was spokesman for President Václav Havel and has his own experience of the United Kingdom, having been ambassador there until quite recently. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. It's always great to be here, one country or two countries. After all, my wife is from Nitra, so our two kids will always be Czech and Slovak, so thank you for having me. I will try to run quickly through the arguments so that Nick doesn't have to carry me off the stage. I will be brief. The first thing, Britain, in the case of Brexit, would lose a seat at the EU table. In any probable future arrangement, it would have to accept all or most EU rules without influencing them, or accept the status of a third country and go through an uncertain procedure to gain access to European markets. Second, Brexit would send a shock through the European and international order. This could have unforeseeable consequences at a time of heightened sensitivities and turbulences in Europe, and you all know what I'm talking about. The EU, third, is a single market in which no tariffs are imposed on imports and exports between member states, and membership in the EU allows Britain to have a say over how the trading rules are drawn up. Britain also benefits from trade deals between the EU and other world powers. Outside the EU, it would have to renegotiate with considerably less leverage. Fourth, the British economy would be hard hit and hundreds of thousands of jobs, maybe even million, might be lost as global manufacturers move to lower cost EU countries. The British car manufacturing industry, foreign owned, would be particularly badly hit. One study found that the worst case Brexit scenario is that the UK economy loses 2.2% of its total GDP by 2030. Other studies predict an even deeper slump. One such study says the worst case scenario is a 6.3 to 9.5% reduction in GDP, a loss of a similar size to that resulting from the global financial crisis of 2008-2009. Fifth, the UK status as one of the world's biggest financial centers would be diminished if it is no longer seen as a gateway to the EU for the likes of the US banks and others. The success of the UK financial services industry is to a large extent built on the EU internal market legislation. About 2.2 million British citizens live in other EU nations, according to the most recent UK government estimates, as opposed to approximately 1.6 million Europeans living in Britain, with Spain playing host to the highest number of British expats, followed by France and Ireland. If Britain left, it could become harder to do this on a permanent basis. Robin. Seventh, strip of influence in Brussels, Berlin, and Paris, Britain would find itself increasingly ignored by Washington and sidelined on big transnational issues such as the environment, security, and trade. America and other allies want Britain to remain in the EU. The UK risks becoming a maverick, isolated state if it leaves. Eighth, the very existence of the United Kingdom in its present form might be at risk if Britain leaves the EU. The pro-European sentiment in Scotland and Northern Ireland is much more pronounced, and a Brexit would almost inevitably lead to a re-emergence of the debate about Scottish independence. And last, but the most important argument against the Brexit in my mind is that Europe needs Britain as much as Britain needs Europe. Without the presence in Europe of the British genius, its knack for pragmatic solutions, its free market philosophy, its global outlook, its financial services, its educational institutions, its military power, its diplomatic skills, and its role as an Atlantic bridge to our partners in the Western civilization, the United States, both Europe and Britain would be fatally diminished to the detriment of both. Thank you.
Michael Zantowski, thank you very much indeed. Now you've heard the arguments 2 for, 2 against the motion that Britain should leave the European Union. Now, who'd like to come in? Who'd like to speak? Let's get microphones moving. 1 there, please. And who else wants to speak? Who would like to contribute? No one else? Only 2. 2. Oh, well, you can share a microphone. That's good. I'll come to you in a moment because what I want to do now is share, and hopefully it'll mobilize some more of you. I'll share with you the kind of views that you have at the moment. Let's get the microphone here, please. Can we move microphones quickly if I ask for them to be moved? Right. When you came in about 45 minutes ago, your views were for the motion, 9%.
I can buy you all the drinks.
Against the motion, 75%. 15% of you had not made up your minds. So I'm afraid you've got a very heavy job to do here in Slovakia to try and convince them on the British case. Right, I want to get as many voices as possible, and I want to know what you think. Yes, no, for or against. Here first.
Okay. Alan Riley, Institute for Statecraft, London. My essential argument, Robin, is...
Well, are you for or against?
Totally against. My argument is simply this. There could be... you could create an exit strategy. You could create an exit strategy which might work. But what the Eurosceptics are currently proposing is incredibly dangerous. We have a budget deficit of 4.5%. We've got a current account deficit of 70%. Our public debt is 80% of GDP. Now, the idea that we would take risk in the economy like this and take such a step is incredible. And I want to just nail one particular point, and it is this point. You talk about we can do a trade deal, it's so easy. It won't be easy. One of the problems with the Eurosceptic argument is they don't understand and don't seem to accept the real core trade issues here. The trade issue is this. All the trade we would do, and we can do, will be under the World Trade Organization, and we can trade in goods. But if we want to trade in services, we have to do a deal with the European Union. Services is pretty much not covered by the World Trade Organization. So the fundamental problem is this. The deficit with the EU is in goods. In other words, we'd be able to do it, the French and Germans would still be able to sell goods into the EU, but we would not be able to sell our services into the European Union.
Okay,
Alan, would be over a barrel.
I think we're getting the drift of your view.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so let me ask them to...
But can I just come back? But
I don't want any speeches.
Okay,
please.
yes. I won't go to speech. I want to come back on, but I want to see what he says.
All right.
Well,
Robin, come back.
yes, thank you. First of all...
Essentially, you don't understand the realities of trade.
Well, I mean, this is one of
and
the...
services in particular.
We hear this all the time. We heard when Britain didn't join the euro, there was going to be a huge collapse in the financial services industry. And this kind of scaremongering has been going on for ages. Well, I do want to thank... sorry, Simon?
Alan.
Sorry, Alan, I beg your pardon. Alan for at least not suggesting, as Mikhail did, that I'll be deported if we leave the European Union. Or even saying that Britain would be fatally diminished. I mean, we're all going to die. This is what I talk about when we talk about the hysteria of the Leave campaign, of the people opposing the Leave campaign. This is what I mean.
But he says you don't understand the core trade issues.
Well, how does he know whether I understand it or not? The point is...
Well, you've just... sorry, with respect, in your initial opening statement, you indicated that there wouldn't be a problem.
No, what I said was there were hysterical claims made on either side. I didn't say there wouldn't be problems, and there are hysterical claims such as the ones you've made. Let me ask you a question back. Why do you say that this is the bad time to leave? Tell me a time when it would be a good time to leave, because I think it's just another red herring where you're trying to scare people rather than provide a coherent argument.
I will give you a Thatcherite exit strategy, a strategy which Margaret Thatcher, who did
So you're not against Brexit, it's just you don't want it now?
Let me put it like this. Well, we could have an argument about whether or not...
No, you just suggested that there would be a right time, so you're in favour of Brexit.
Let me explain. If you're going to do it, if you're going to have a sane exit strategy, what you would do is, first of all, you reduce the level of British public debt, fix the current account, and deal with the budget deficit as stage one.
Okay.
Stage two, you would rebalance the British economy so you have a greater trade in goods.
Yes, you will.
Which would have the effect
All right.
of making it easier to do Brexit.
Alan, we're getting the drift here.
But the point about it is none of that has been
But it's
done.
not an argument against Brexit.
Yes,
it's
but
just an argument against the timing of Brexit.
Well, the point about it is we've got a vote on June the 23rd, and it's incredibly dangerous
All
to
right.
do it with no credible exit strategy.
Right, Alan,
That's the point.
Alan, I want to get many more voices, so thank you very much for that. You can come back possibly later, depending on how many other people want to speak. Philip Blond, and can you get the microphone down here, please? Who's got the microphone? Microphone down here, please.
Currently, Britain exports roughly 44% of its exports to Europe. The EU exports 8% of its exports back to the United Kingdom. It's very clear who would be the loser. Of those exports, 80% of all UK exports are services. And it's services that would be locked out by an exit. There is no way to close a current account deficit unless by exports. So what would actually happen is your current account deficit, because you weren't able to export, would widen from where it already is dramatically. I think Alan, broadly speaking, is absolutely right. It would be not fatal. No moves are fatal unless they are.
Right,
but this isn't one of them.
These are important technical points here, but do either of you want to come back quickly on that from Philip? Alika.
Well, I think it's very important that when you're talking about whether you're going to be leaving European Union or not, that all what you're discussing is not about whether your country is going to collapse economically or not. Decision to be in European Union or not is not only a question of economy.
Of course.
I think that very often that people forget that the democratic point of view in the whole discussion, that the Brits or Greenlanders in this sense were to decide whether they want to be part of the European Union or not. European Union will, whether you have left it or not, you will still be very important to the European Union.
But haven't you got a unique
trade-wise.
position, though? Because in the end, Denmark subsidizes Greenland to a significant extent each year. So you know where your money is coming from.
Yeah, but that's not the most important money that
Well,
Greenland gets.
it's helpful.
Back then, we got more
In a
because
country of
of the European
50,000,
Union.
that's
Because
useful.
European Union gave us so much more. And we knew that we were going to lose it by the time we were getting out of the European Union. But we decided that it's not the money that we get from the European Union that's going to be decide how we're going to be living. We're going to be reorganizing our own economy with the European Union as a partner. And in this sense, it meant that our economy went down at some level. But at the long run, it has been the best decision we ever did.
Right. Who would like to speak for the motion, please? Anyone like to speak for the motion? Well, there are some of you who do.
There.
Lady, please, yes. Could I get the microphone to you? The microphone. Can you keep that microphone. Could you stay within the group, please, so we don't have to wait each time? To this lady, please. Thank you.
No, it's fine. I absolutely agree with you. I represent here a Young Leaders Forum. We're also a voice here. And I would like to maybe pose a question, if I may.
Please do, yeah.
Whether
But you are for the motion.
I'm for the motion.
In other words, that Britain should leave the European Union.
Oh, okay. I'm against the motion. I apologize.
That's why I thought I ought to clarify.
Nick, can I make
Please.
a comment which might be relevant to the fact
Please
that
do.
few people want to come forward? This is one of the problems in the debate, or lack of it, in Europe. And I've seen this in conferences all over Europe, whether it be in Brussels, whether it be here, whether it be in Poland or in Germany, is that, and this almost speaks back to Alan's argument, and I repeat, remember, he did not make an argument against Brexit, just against the timing of it. The point is that there is such a monolithic view about the European Union, a sense of almost religious certainty that this is the only way to go, that any sort of dissenting view is held to be a kind of heresy. And I think you're being very badly served. Just look around Europe. Do you really see a continent that is not in very serious crisis? And in crisis because of very significant policies by the European Union, such as the folly of the euro, which massively exacerbated, didn't cause, but exacerbated the crisis in southern Europe.
Look, the point is that sometimes institutions cause bad things to happen. But what you don't have to have is a Maoist solution that says, well, let's level everything, because what could replace it? is often worse. I'm actually with you. I'm against the euro and I'm pro the European Union. What I would like to do...
Like Britain is.
Like Britain is. What I would like to do is create a world where the outers have as much parity as the inners, because I think the euro has been an economic disaster for Europe. Italy, for instance, hasn't had a single quarter of economic growth since it joined the European Union. That said, I think the overall benefits from the European Union are so keenly felt in places like this. I think it's slightly insulting to assume that the people here are monolithic. They know the benefits of the European Union very keenly. I think what I would like to do is ask the audience the following question. Why do you fear, or do you fear Britain leaving the European Union? What do you fear would happen to the European Union if Britain left? I fear Britain leaving the European Union because I think the EU would collapse. And I think that the consequences of that would really be incredibly extreme and make the levels of instability we currently suffer, which come, euro aside, from, I think, the issues of globalization, the rise of radical Islam at an extremist level, Russian nationalism in the East. These are not caused by the EU.
Well, let me see if I can smoke out anyone who is voting here for the motion to answer that question about what you think the impact will be on the European Union if Britain does leave. The 12 of you don't want to... Where? I can't see. Oh, okay, please, yeah. Microphone over here, please. And if you could just say if you're for or against the motion, and answer that question.
I'm in favor of Brexit, but for all negative, illogical reasons. So actually, I want Brexit to see Britain how they will do it on their own, because they will not then poison the rest of the European debate. There is anyway very little.
You want to see a bad experiment, do
no,
you?
I want to see I want to see a bad lead, but maybe a good outcome, because actually that will put a test whether European Union without Britain will be able to survive, which we will not know. And also it will put a test whether Great Britain will be able to survive or turn into Little England, because actually there are parts of Great Britain that are more interested to stay in the European Union.
And Scotland certainly will come back.
Got a question?
We'll see.
Okay.
But to me, it's, and also, let me give you one example of what do I mean by illogical, because there's a lot of rational choice theory here. Imagine a negotiation table where on the other side you have the Germans and the French and the other actually giving those powers back to Britain to trade the 80% of services. Do you think that they will be in favor, or they will not, they will act super rationally and there won't be any subjective feeling in that table, not to mention the word retribution? Right. I would, and this is Europe, which is actually the least logical of the last 2 or 3 decades. So that any negotiation will happen amidst that kind of environment.
All right, I throw this out. If Britain leaves, does the European Union then invite it back again?
This is getting very, very interesting. I'm against the Brexit for exactly the opposite reasons than you have just mentioned. Because I do agree with some of the critics of the EU that there are many things wrong with the current EU and that it's badly in need of reforms. And Britain in Europe is, one country that's in favor of the reforms, that has the energy, the size, and the strength to try to help push them through. And without Britain, I'm afraid all hope is lost.
Without Britain, you risk a German-dominated European Union that will. No, but genuinely, you don't. Without Britain, you won't have a Europe of diverse polarity. You'll have a Europe with one dominant partner who essentially subsidizes the debts of everybody else. And if you think the Germans are good at empire, well, history will teach you otherwise.
Let me tell you, you don't have to convince many people, because they have to do the convincing work.
You've experienced it.
But Alika and Robin, what about this argument, though, that actually this is, and I'm paraphrasing here, that this is a bad experiment, and you're doing it, and actually Britain would want to come back in again pretty quickly?
Well, again, fantasy world. Look, I think the fact is that what it does actually do is raise a very important point, which was touched upon also by Philip and by Michal, and I'm not sure exactly in a certain sense whether we disagree on this. The European political classes, in a kind of do any of you know the Swiss-American psychologist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross? And she talked about 5 stages of grief, and they were, try and dredge this out, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And basically, when some great crisis happens in life, typically originally the death of a relative, or it could be a divorce, it could be all sorts of things, the first stage is to go into denial. And that is where the European political classes are now. They have created utterly failing supranational structures, such as the euro, which there's some agreement on this, but many, many others as well. Unlimited migration is not only unethical, it excludes other parts of the world in a very contrary way to the whole Enlightenment principle of universalism. They are in denial about something, but denial is not the same as ignorance. They know they've messed up. The problem is they don't know what to do, so they're angry about it, and that's the anger. And the anger is punish Britain if Britain leaves. But what kind of an argument is that? The argument is, we know we've messed this all up. If Britain leaves, the great danger is Britain will be a success outside the European Union. And if it's a success outside the European Union, it might shame other countries into really rethinking a project that isn't working. And I return to this point. When you look around you, do you really see a continent run by the European Union that is a success?
Well,
it certainly isn't a success in the terms they wanted 10 years ago.
Robin, let me put that to Philip and Michael. Do you think that this could be a success? In other words, what Robin has just said.
No, Britain is will be, I think, a profoundly successful country in or as the European Union. It's a site of creativity, innovation, wonderful institutions.
So you're partly on his side?
No, it would be false to say it's a complete disaster, because it wouldn't be.
I agree.
We would still be splendid, you know. But we wouldn't be as splendid with our European colleagues. I want to bring...
Would we be splendid and well off with a reduced budget deficit?
We would not be playing at the level we've played for the last 5 or 6 centuries. I want a Britain where people in this room can come to London, can live, study, contribute, go home. They enrich our culture, we hopefully enrich theirs. I want a Britain whose influence remains global, profound, and utterly transformative. I would argue that Britain has been the most historically influential nation in the world since Rome, and I don't want it to end. And I don't think the world wants it to end. There is no country who wants Britain to leave the EU. We know that Britain, for all of its faults, and that quite frankly compared with other countries, aren't that many.
You hear some people with French accents saying different things.
You know. And I like that. And we need to. What is great about Europe is we are a site of Western civilization, and I believe in Western civilization. And what destroyed Western civilization was nationalism. Nationalism is the great killer. And if we can recreate, as we have done, and I don't agree with Robin, that it's just not the case that Europe is a wholly failing institution. It's just not the case. Go to Poland. You know, here, it's not failing. It's failing in some areas, and I'm all for radical reform. I'm against the euro. I'm against mass migration. I'm in certain cases against free movement of labour. I'm against the European Court of Human Rights. So I'm not, but let us not forgo the great European project, because listen, I travel, as no doubt you do, all over the world, and everywhere you go, the elites, often the corrupt elites, all have escape plans that all end in Europe because we're stable. Because everywhere else increasingly is governed by criminals, by oligarchs, and only in Europe do we have a chance for an alternative.
Right.
And that's what we shouldn't give up.
Let me hear more voices. Let me tell you that 32 of you were either for the motion or undecided. So let me hear from you, if I can, please. This is not a one-sided debate with one-sided views. So please, in the interest of hearing all sides, I'd love to hear more from the 32 of you. Please, you have the microphone, and you as well.
Thank you.
And you are for or against?
I am against the motion.
That's okay. We're resigned to it.
My question is, for example, in this country, I admit that, for example, the European Union has many imperfections, but in this country, the European Union is very often the easy scapegoat for many incompetences of the national government or national institutions. And my question towards the panelists is Brexit a very simplistic solution to a very complex problem within Britain? Wouldn't it be better for Britain to discuss and solve the problems within Europe, other than just giving people this simple solution, let's exit and everything's going to be fantastic? That's my question.
Since you are in such a dire
For or
need,
against?
I'm against, but I'm actually going to start with giving you an argument in favor, because you're in such a really dire need of hearing something. So, you know, the reason why Britain should exit is that it has been acting like a spoiled brat. It has got so many exceptions, so many separate deals, and it's still asking for more at the times of crisis. Go, do it on your own. That would be a clear example, but still I think that that's not a good idea, mainly for Britain. I think
Denmark has opt-outs as well.
yes, I mean, you know,
And
you can
Norway.
find
And
others
Norway,
as well.
but Norway's not a member.
And yes, you know, the UK might end up in a position of Norway, where it actually takes the deals that are decided in Brussels without being at the table. That's not very good for Britain. It's much better for the rest of the EU, if there is one to remain. Why I want UK to stay in is that I come from Slovakia. I've lived in the region, Czech Republic, Poland, Hungary as well, and I've seen when Czechoslovakia split. The amount of transaction costs, you can be good, you can be well off, but you're wasting so much energy and so much time to get through. And I don't think that's useful. But there was an important argument that Alika, you mentioned, and I don't think that Greenland is a good example to bring because of the structure of your economy. There's no one else whose 2/3 of the economy is about fish and fishing. But, and most of the experts going to Greenland and Greenland subsidizing in return. UK's economy is much more complex, but at the same time I agree that the argument shouldn't be only about economy. And the argument that you brought, and I really value that you brought it, is actually about democracy. People feel that they don't have the voice on the European affairs. But for me, that's not the solution to slam the door and exit the relationship. What we need to do is we need to find how people can have a voice on issues they actually understand and that they can take those decisions that are not against them.
All right.
Because exit would be against the interest of British citizens.
Let me just see if anyone else wants to come in first. Does anyone else want to come in?
this?
Okay, yes, a hand there.
I
Can we
find
get the
this-
microphone here,
look,
please?
I mean, this is what you hear so often in continental Europe, and I find it very difficult to accept. You know, the EU is a union of 28 countries. It's a democratic union. You know, each is supposed to have its own voice in the debate. Each is free to make its own demands. Each is free to make its own complaints. And I've never had, when the Germans or the French or the Cypriots, you know, pushed something through the European Council, that they were behaving like brats. You know, this is, I think, a completely prejudiced criticism of the British approach, and I think that it should be taken on a rational level. I mean, if the argument is sound, let's discuss the argument. If the complaint is sound, let's discuss the complaint. But you know, why call each other names like brats?
I'm afraid that is, and this has absolutely not been the case with either you, Mikhail, or you, Philip, and a civilized discussion is something that both sides are guilty of not having in Britain, as I'm sure Philip will testify to. But the name-calling, the aggression, what I refer to is something I really do think, and Philip, I think you were wrong to say I'm being insulting. I'm not being insulting. I'm applying it to everybody across continental Europe, not just Slovakia, certainly not just Slovakia, is that you have to realize, you probably do anyway, that the idea of debate on the European issue is to have four people who agree with each other consistently year after year after year. And the kind of arguments, you'll notice one put, and Aleka sort of nudged me a moment ago and said, nobody has dared take you on the democracy argument. Because you can't. But the other problem is I really wonder, and this is a challenge, does anybody really understand the argument I made, and can they knock it down?
Well, let me ask, does anyone want to take on Robin on the democracy argument? Not in Slovakia, anyway.
I think when we're talking about that, it's very difficult to compare Greenland with Britain and many other countries. Yeah, the European Union is also many different kinds of countries working together that are very different from each other. And all of them also maybe sometimes also difficult to see an example to it and comparing to. And I think very often the arguments the people have about the European Union, whether they want to be there or not, very often is that the legislation and the laws that are being adopted by the European Union, people have difficulty in seeing themselves in it. Is the European Union policy a mirror of my life, of the life that I want in my country? Is that the way that I want my grandchildren to grow up, where the decisions for their lives, for their everyday life that will have an impact are being decided somewhere else besides your own parliament and your own governments? And I think it's also very important to see the policy that's being made in the European Union. Is that the policy that I do follow and think that this is the kind of a country and principles and values that my grandchildren should be living under? The crisis that the European Union is going through are crises that are just only very little tip of the many crises they will be facing. And I think also that the European Union, within the last few years that we have seen how it has been developing, has not necessarily been a stronger one. On the contrary, the European member states are having different kinds of opinions about each other and how to deal with things.
But
It's
do
also
you believe solutions will come more readily and more effectively from individual member states rather than the European Union?
I think that even the parliaments that are member of the European Union do also have a difficulty on following all the way through the legislation that are to be adopted in the European Union, because they feel that the part of their own integrity is somewhere else than in their own parliaments.
All right, let me pick up from that lady there.
Yes, actually, I want to ask...
Are you for or against?
I am against.
Or undecided?
Unfortunately, I'm against. But I have a question for you. Do you think that the topic of migration, as presented when Mr. Cameron went to negotiate that package and so on, has done more damage than good to your cause? Because you speak here to people in Slovakia, as you said, you lived in Slovakia, so if you go to Eastern Slovakia, actually there are a lot of Slovaks who benefited from the possibility to go and work in Britain. So the question was, do you think that putting this question about migration did more damage or good to your cause? Thank you.
Thanks for the question, and I totally understand. One thing I think, to take one step back in order to clarify where I stand and also to kind of mollify concerns, Britain leaving the European Union does not mean Britain leaving Europe. Europe and the European Union are not the same thing. Europe is a geographical concept. The European Union is a political construct, which is built upon a whole regional ideal. Personally, I'm in favour of free migration. Actually, it's one of the things, but my personal view is not the same as saying that I therefore should impose it through a similar sort of elite in Brussels and make it continent-wide. I think Britain would have a very liberal immigration policy outside the European Union.
What do you mean by liberal? What do you mean by liberal? More people being allowed in?
Not more people being allowed in, but basically, first of all, it'd be internationalists and not regionalists. And the European Union is a very old-fashioned concept.
What do you mean, more Indians and more Chinese?
Well, and Canadians and Australians and Americans, wherever from the world, is not to be discriminatory, is to accept that if people have the skill set, which is requisite. I mean, I don't believe there's anybody...
We already have that policy in the United Kingdom.
But we have to figure it out in relation to an unlimited policy in Europe, do we?
Well, the unlimited, the point is to be in favour. The problems we face are not problems that we can tackle at the national level. Unless you think we shut up shop, do Fortress Luxembourg, Fortress France, Fortress Britain, all of which would make us far more insecure. The problems we face are global in nature and can only be tackled at a level that is larger than the nation state.
But that's a false dichotomy.
If you don't, it's not a dichotomy. It's the reality of a world where even now Europe's population is only 12%. It's 12% of the world population. Soon it'll be less than 5% of the world population. If Europe is going to continue to be, as I think it is, a beacon for the world, we have to gain advantage from the world, we have to operate at a level above that of the nation state. The most obvious and pressing example is security. If you look at what's happening in Syria, if you look at what's happening in Libya, we can't subcontract to the United States. They have pivoted to Asia. We can only solve these problems together by working in concert, and we have to create a completely new European defence and security structure that's below the nuclear button that is NATO, that can stabilise these countries. We're not going to be able to do this on bilateral basis.
But Philip,
we can only do this through
David Cameron has
quite
been
frankly,
saying
we're not able to do it as it is.
we're not able to do it as it is, but we at least have a platform where it could be done. The trouble is, if you argue for chaos, what you might not get is stability. You're much more likely to get more chaos.
Right.
Things, when they change, don't always get better. It could get far, far worse.
What do you say, though, on that security issue? David Cameron keeps talking about security. That's one of the important reasons for staying in the European Union. You had Richard Dearlove, the former head of MI6, who's now the head of a Cambridge college, saying, actually, it's a myth. We only really deal substantively on security with one or two nations on a bilateral basis. And Michael Hayden, the former head of the CIA and Defense Intelligence Agency, said exactly the same thing.
Well,
don't delude yourself.
Yeah, well, they are yesterday's men, and I quote therefore from that Pauline Neville-Jones. What you do with
Former
security,
head of the Joint Intelligence Committee.
Indeed. What you do with security is you increase your circle. You get more information, you build up networks so that actually you're more powerful than just bilaterals, because we're threatened on a 360-degree level.
But Philip,
and actually, I'll just finish this point. And actually, we're more secure if we can teach our European neighbours how to create the type of security apparatus that works. And Britain has one of the world's leading security apparatus that actually also is compatible with civic and political freedom.
Right.
This is something we can teach others, and teaching other countries how to be secure makes us more secure.
Right, we've got 5 more minutes of debate. Then I'm going to hear from each of the 4 speakers in reverse order. So anyone else want to come in? You want to come in? Anyone else want to come in? Please, the lady here. You always sit on your hands until the last minute. So, right, the lady there, and the gentleman here, and the gentleman there, and the gentleman there. But I'm going to ask you to speak for no more than 45 seconds, please.
Okay, so at the end,
yes or
four.
No? For or against?
4. That's 4. So
I'm glad to
there.
hear from you.
And I was in that 7%. Well,
why?
To start with, the security, it's a pity actually that I can't see here the name tag, so I can't really refer to your name.
Philip,
call him Philip Blonde.
Okay, what you mean that they're the security. So what this means, the more spendings on defense, and this means more war in the region or elsewhere in the Middle East, when you are mentioning about the more security and spendings more on the defense.
Okay.
That's the first question.
No, let's leave it at that, please, because otherwise we're running out of time. All of you should have spoken earlier, please. Gentleman there. And then the gentleman here needs the microphone here, please.
Years ago, Baroness Thatcher said...
Are you for or against?
I am undecided, and I will say why. Baroness Thatcher said the Euro train should stop before Maastricht. I would say that was a very wise quotation. Baroness saw what was necessary for common Europe without all the other floors that had been built later. I was living behind barbed wire for 37 years, a Euro fan, Euro believer. Now I switched to Euro melancholist. Looking at Europe today, and that's why I'm undecided. If I would be Britain, I fully accept the inherent deficit of democracy in European Union, which is inborn and cannot be changed. But being a Slovak, I see in Britain, I love Britain, an icebreaker that could, being in European Union, crash the ice that grew in the last 20 years and make a free sea for countries in Europe, smaller countries that are not so important, so they have not the power to crash the ice.
Thank
And
you.
that's why I would vote
Pick it up at the end, pick it
undecided,
up at the end.
because with my heart, I accept a lot of things said. On the other side, I need Britain in the European Union.
Of course, John Major was the Prime Minister at Maastricht, not Baroness Thatcher.
But she said it.
Sure.
About Maastricht.
All right. So
For or against?
I am against. Against Brexit. First thing is that for Greenland, it may have been easier to step out of the European Union because of the distance and the whole psychology that they are a bit further. Another thing is that UK, it would be, for me at least, it would be kind of sad to say European Union, UK not included, sorry. And I'm sorry. Oh, could it be the breaking point for maybe some other countries that are considering stepping out of the European Union? Because it may encourage them that, hey, look, UK did it, so we may do it
That's
too.
certainly the fear.
Yes.
Thank you. Who was the other person who wanted to come in, please? The gentleman there, please. The microphone there. And then
Hello?
I'm going to go to you and then to him, please.
Okay.
For or against?
I'm also against, and just I wanted to say that there are nowadays a lot of more serious issues as issues of Great Britain. Now European Union, the whole world suffers a lot of challenges, started from terrorism, global climate and economical issues. And I think if Britain will go out of European Union, it will give precedent for a lot of countries, for example, Scotland, Ireland, etc. And also now, I think it's not the right time to do it, because better to work as a team and maybe to come out of these problems even stronger as before.
Thank you very much indeed. Pass the microphone back to the gentleman back there. Then I'm going to ask each of the four in reverse order to summarize their view of what we've heard, their responses, but also to try and convince. And then we're going to start voting in a moment. So
Yeah.
think about what you're going to do with your card.
So good afternoon. I'm British. I've lived in Central Eastern Europe for the last 10 years, and I'm for the motion.
Can you vote in the referendum?
Yes, and I will be voting in the referendum.
Which way?
To leave.
For Brexit.
Brexit.
Okay.
And I won't be voting on the economic arguments. I'll be voting on the democratic and sovereignty argument. For me, I love Europe. I'm not anti-Europe at all. I live here in Central Eastern Europe and I love it very much. But I am anti-EU. I don't believe in political union.
What will be the status of where you're living here when you're no longer a member of the European Union?
I'm not concerned about that. What will be, will be. I mean, many Brits live all over the world. They don't all necessarily live in the European Union. I would say more British live outside the European Union than they do in the European Union. For me, that's irrelevant. The EU, for me, is trying to create a federal structure. It wants to create a United States of Europe. And today, for me, the European Union is undemocratic. We can't elect people except MEPs, but they don't have any real power. It hasn't had its accounts signed off for 20 years, I think, so we really don't know how money is spent. And I recall, I wasn't able to vote in 1975 when we had a referendum for a common market, but it was a referendum for a common market. We have a common market today, but it's very, very different from what it was back then. We had the Maastricht, the Lisbon treaties passed without any consultation with the British people. And I think the British people are now waking up to the fact that, things are a lot more than what they were back then. So I agree. Common market, yes. Political union, no.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to have to close the floor now, regrettably. Everything's now beginning to get going, but time is marching on. Can we get the voting boxes, please, and start circulating them? And would you make your decision on your ballot box, on your ballot paper, please, and tear it one way or the other? It'd be great if all the undecideds do make up your minds, so that we know whether those on my right have convinced you to move in a direction which is against the majority at the moment. So let's get the boxes moving very quickly, please, and don't cling on to the box. It's big. It's so big, you won't cling onto it anyway. But can you mechanically move those boxes very quickly? Right, I want to now ask Michael to start off as the first voice against the motion. Michael, summarize.
Well, I will concede 1 point to my friend Robin. There is no predicting what would really happen in case of a Brexit. I don't think anybody really knows. There are so many underlying assumptions that all the numbers that you hear on both sides of the issues are just so much hot air. And, you know, I'm here in Bratislava. Many of us remember the debate before the division of Czechoslovakia happened in 1992, and there were, at that time, many dire predictions about what would happen to Slovakia after the separation. And in fact, Slovakia has done very well and should be congratulated for that. But I'm not going to concede more than that, because I apologize for getting a little technical, but the only responsible strategy in war and diplomacy is what is called the minimax strategy. You try to minimize the risks while maximizing the gains. That's all. It's as simple as that. And the risks of a Brexit are incalculable. And on this, Prime Minister Cameron's strategy is quite right, extracting as many concessions from the EU as possible while keeping Britain in. And I hope he succeeds. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Michael. And I would like you to address the last three speakers, the particular point here about Brexit being a simplistic solution, given the complexities. In other words, easy to do, as you're all doing at the moment, voting one way or the other, but actually it's more layered and veneered. Alecha.
Europe is great, it will always be. And Europe is also always going to be very important economically, also among all European country members. This is not a question of how far you are from European Union. This is not a question of how far you are to the continent. This is a question of how you are being part in the European Union system. I think it's very important to see that whether you are part of the European Union or not, European Union will always be very important to you. It has been for Greenland. By the time we stepped out of the European Union and today, we have seen that today we gain more economic benefit of the European Union being outside the European Union, because we organized our cooperation with the European Union differently than we did before. Now its terms are more on our own agenda. The terms are on the terms that we want to deal with the European Union instead of the other way around. And I think it's very important that it is possible to have a better, stronger voice outside the European Union once you step out. We have known and we have seen how it was inside. And outside today, it was the right decision. And I think also that what Greenland gains from the European Union partnership agreement we have today, we have never stood stronger in the European Union than we did today without having to be a member state. It's very important that you keep your own integrity, your own parliaments to decide about what kind of life you want in your own country, still being global, still being very strong, still being very important to the European Union. Who says that European Union member states is the only way ahead? The better for us it has been is that life is even better outside being a strong partner to the European Union.
Thank you very much indeed, Hammond. Now the last voice against the motion, Philip Blond.
Thank you. Are the things wrong with the European Union? Undoubtedly, multiple and many. I would be viewed as very un-European by most of those who I think would seek to support it, not least the fact that I'm against the Eurozone. Yes, it is undemocratic, but who makes it so? Who makes the European undemocratic? The very nation states whose politicians you elect. The reason there isn't democracy is the people you elect don't want democracy at the European level. Do you know why? Because it would make them less important. They would like to have it as it is in the Council of Ministers, whereas individual countries, they have very real power. So it's not undemocratic, it's your democracies deciding the type of democracies they want to have. If there is popular demand for European-wide elections, and I would support that, if there is popular demand for an EU-wide president, and I would support that, that would close it off. But the only people stopping it are the very people you elect. So just to be clear, this isn't a secretive clique that is out to sort of do terrible things behind the back to a democracy-wishing public. These are your own people. Secondly, the point is this, I really liked your point about simple answer. Look, in my view, we're facing several global megatrends, and the megatrends are very extreme. If you look at the economy, you look at the first wave of globalization destroyed working class lives in the developed world across the continent. It destroyed industrial, skilled and semi-skilled labor. That is going to happen to the middle class with the rise of the robots. You've now got robots who can already write journalistic articles, have a better predictive and diagnostic outcome. They're better than doctors. And they can also be receptionists. They already exist. And those receptionists, as robots, can remember everything that they've ever said to you and repeat back your conversations to them. Who wouldn't prefer that? The point would be, yeah, it's mixed, isn't it? The point would be, is these are the mega trends. When you also ally that as a result of radical Islam, the collapse in unsafe states across the world, we have rising risks, rising insecurity. And the idea that we can face these trends better as separate nations is farcical and is nonsense. The issue of tax and crime, which I think are interrelated, can only be tackled at the level they're currently be tackled about. And if you think you can make successful global war against radical Islam on your own as an individual nation state, you're a fool. So this is the best we've got. Can it be improved? Absolutely. Should it be? Absolutely. I want Britain to take a leadership position in Europe, which it hasn't done. It has been a bit, not so much as a spoilt brat, as an indifferent child. It should realise its historical responsibility. It should realise that it would have many friends and allies. And I think Britain, as a voice for the transformation of Europe and the reform of Europe, that would be the best of all possible worlds.
This has been a great debate. Would a robot have made it even better with all the contributions from up here? That I leave open. Actually, we haven't finished. Well done, Philip. Thank you. The final voice for the motion that Britain should exit the European Union, the United Kingdom, I should say, still united, Robin Shepherd.
Thank you. Well, if the robot was Alicia Vikander in Ex Machina, it would definitely have improved proceedings tonight. The issues of megatrends that were raised by Philip Blom. Look, one of the big megatrends here is that regionalism is a thing of the past. It is an ideal which developed during the Cold War. It is a 1970s solution to a 1940s problem. The issues today are global, and this is where I come back to the point where I disagree respectfully, again, with Philip. It is a false dichotomy. Pulling out of the European Union doesn't mean stopping cooperating with the European Union at any level at all. What it means is not having your laws made in another jurisdiction. And that's the central point which I believe is missed in this argument, oh, well, if we had elections for the European Commission, this would make Europe democratic. No, the point is, and this is conceptually central, and this is the point I want to leave you with tonight, and to go home and think it through, and if in the end you disagree, that's fine. But I don't think this issue has been sufficiently thought through anywhere on continental Europe. The European Union cannot be a democratic enterprise because there isn't a demos, there isn't a shared political culture. And that is what is causing so much damage to the political culture of Europe. Nick asked one question, and I think I'll be the only one to respond to it, whether Brexit is a simple solution.
Well, it came from down there.
Down there, for a simplistic solution. No, it's a complex solution to a complex problem. There is no...
But yes and no is not complex. It's actually one way or the other.
Voting in an election for one party or another is not complex. The fact is the issues are inevitably complex. That doesn't mean that the complexity should make us feel that we can't deal with them. The European Union is something which needs to be reconstituted. And Philip and Michael agree with that. It is what astounds me with the evidence we've seen over the last year is that the European political classes are simply inaccessible to serious argument. They're not going to reform. They're not going to pull back the euro. They're not going to make these changes. And I think you're living in a fantasy land if you do. Brexit is the best way, not just for us, it's also the best for continental Europe because it prevents, I hope, the Europe from making the kind of mistake it has consistently made in the past with pan-European enterprises which always end in disaster. Thank you for your attention.
Just before I give you the outcome of your voting, let me just share with you something which none of you will have been aware of. But I'd just like very quickly the reactions here up on the platform. Ursula von der Leyen, the German defense minister, was speaking at the Grand Hotel about 3 hours ago. And she said something very interesting. She said that all the leaders in Europe should have shared the negatives of going into the euro and the negatives of the Schengen agreement. In other words, not just portrayed it as great that you can have free mobility around Europe, great that you can have a common currency. I'd just like to, in 30 seconds each, whether if that had been put forward, there would be a more prosaic and pragmatic understanding of some of the current problems, which is voting against problems. Robin, quickly.
Well, it's very interesting because I watched the minister speak as well, and she talked about the euro as being gorgeous.
But this particular point,
well,
we should have shared the likely negatives.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, if you're going to do something which is manifestly ridiculous to start with, then you're going to have to live with the consequences of it.
Philip.
Yes, I think she should have shared the negatives, and I would not have had the euro, and I would not have had the level of free movement. I think it's much safer, given the rise of terrorism, that all countries have free movement, but with the UK type of exception. And the UK actually has very good border controls. It manages to effectively prevent terrorists coming in. The terrorists we've had are all homegrown. So I think there is a middle that we can create, and that's what we should pursue. And Robin's also wrong that there's no successful pan-European project. Yes, there was. The medieval church, beginning in the 10th century, disarmed the whole of Europe in the greatest act of disarmament the world has ever seen. And we had 300 to 400 years of Western civilization. And that, friends, is a success.
All right, Aleja, just your view on this one point from the German defense minister.
I think it's very important to see that once you are part of something bigger besides your own country, that means very often decisions will be made that you do not agree upon. And you're going to have to live with the consequences that are made decisions by others. And having to share that, I think it's very, very strong word to say. I think that's where the problem comes in with the European Union, is that you are part of something that you might not necessarily always agree upon. And you are going to be the one that is paying for the consequences. I think that it's very important to see the problems and how the European Union is trying to solve these years is showing a lot of fear in many European Union member states. Is how are we dealing with the defense question? How are we dealing with the refugees? How are we dealing with terrorism and many other things? And I see European Union in fear. I see European Union in many unsolved, unanswered questions that should have been prepared already before.
Right. Michael, finally, you've been in the castle, you've been in opposition, you've been representing a government. What do you think about the pragmatic challenges and whether it could succeed, this idea of actually telling people that if you go forward with policies, actually there are significant downsides as a way of getting them sold, both inside a country and also internationally?
It's a real problem. If you want to share the negatives of a policy, you should have an effective control over how that policy is created and how it's executed. And at this point in time, it's very dangerous to say that we should share negatives of the, for example, Greek immigration policies when we had no control over them in the first place. At the risk of playing a devil's advocate, I like Philip's remark about the middle age project of European peace and confederation, but let me note, and in no way do I want to compare the current EU to that, but let me note that the last European confederation project before the European Union was the project of Joachim von Ribbentrop of 1944. You can look it up in history books.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you to all. Let me now give you the outcome of the vote. I have to say that there hasn't been much difference Therefore, there has not been a lot of persuasion success up on this platform. The European Union should reimpose that on the motion that the UK will be better off outside the European Union. The voting was as follows. Beforehand, it was 8.75% for, against 105 people, 76.6%, undecided 20 of you, about 15%. It's hardly moved. 2 people have become a little more positive about the motion. 3 of you have made up your mind, but the overwhelming majority is against the motion, saying that the UK will be better off, believing that the UK will be worse off outside the European Union. So I declare that the motion has been significantly defeated, and those on my left have succeeded tonight in persuading you that that is the correct case. Well done.
See you in Britain. See you in Britain.
Thank you all very much indeed, and particularly for being patient as we started a little late due to a technical problem or two. But I'm most grateful to you and also to Globsec for allowing us to do this. Thank you very much, and thanks as well to the panelists.
Very enjoyable, I thought.
Went very quickly. Thank you.
Went very
Don't you really think you'd persuade them?
Okay. Lovely to meet you, Michael.
Very good meeting you. Good, Philip. Thanks very much
Thanks
indeed.
very much.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Don't sit there, there's nothing more coming, except there is the next session if you're staying for it. But that's the end of the debate anyway.
So you're going back to the hotel? Yes. Right. Okay, good. Thanks. Do you want this?